The night was heavy with secrets as the kingdom's wealthiest couple sat at their dining table, surrounded by jewels, gold, and treasures beyond imagination. Yet, amid all the luxury, the air was thick with something far darker. She could feel it, the cold whisper that brushed against her neck as the moonlight danced through their mansion's windows. "I thought wealth would set us free," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But it wasn't freedom she had received. It was a curse. "It started the night we married," she would later tell herself, retracing the steps of her fateful decision. Her husband, the great billionaire, had promised her the world. His wealth was immense, built on gold, land, and a name that was whispered in awe throughout the kingdom. But what he didn't tell her, what he had hidden from even the gods themselves, was that their marriage was not one forged in love alone. The roots of their union stretched far deeper, into the earth beneath their palace, into the ancient gold mines that had once belonged to her ancestors. The very night of their wedding, when she donned the royal regalia, a strange sensation swept over her. The gold necklace she wore felt heavy. As though it were more than just a piece of jewelry, it felt like a chain binding her to a destiny she had not chosen. As her husband had placed the necklace around her neck, "You are now one with this land," he had said. "Together we will rule, and this wealth will be ours forever." His words should have been a blessing, but in her heart, she felt only dread. Days passed, and their wealth continued to grow, yet so did the strange occurrences around her. Every night, as she slept in the luxury of their grand home, she could hear the distant hum of whispers, a haunting voice that seemed to call her from beneath the earth. "What have you brought upon us?" the voice would hiss in the darkness. It was an eerie, chilling sound that crawled under her skin, but her husband would dismiss it as the stresses of ruling such a vast empire. "Ignore it," he would say. "It's just the weight of our success." But the whispers grew louder. It wasn't long before her wealth began to slip through her fingers, not in the way she expected. It was something much darker. The family fortune, once boundless, began to falter, and the ancestral lands, which had always been fertile, began to decay. The gold in the mines became cursed, refusing to give up its treasures, causing the once prosperous kingdom to fall into financial ruin. It wasn't just the land that was affected. Her body began to wither as well. She felt it first in her hands, then in her chest, a heaviness that couldn't be explained. She confronted her husband one fateful evening, after the royal feast. The gold around her neck seemed to burn her skin. "What is happening?" she demanded, her eyes filled with the fear she had kept hidden for so long. Her husband, the once confident and loving man, looked at her with a strange, hollow expression. He took a long breath, his eyes avoiding hers. "The land's wealth is not just ours. It belongs to them." He didn't need to say more. She knew. The whispers, the gold, the land, it was all tied to something ancient, something ancestral. The curse of her bloodline, tied to the very earth beneath their feet, was awakening. The wealth they had built, the mansion they lived in, the life they had forged was all built on the bones of those who came before them, and it was starting to collect its debt. In the stillness of that moment, her husband finally confessed the truth. "It's the land's price," he said softly. "We thought we could escape it, but we cannot." He didn't say it aloud, but she understood. They had made a terrible bargain with the gods, and now the price was being paid. The question wasn't whether they could escape the curse, but how far they would be willing to go to pay it. As the days went by, her health continued to deteriorate, but the kingdom's collapse was even more striking. Businesses shut down. The once bustling markets grew silent, and the wealth that had filled her fingers like sand was slipping away. "It's happening again," she would whisper to herself, as she stared at the crumbling walls of her palace, once a symbol of opulence and power, now crumbling into nothingness. Her husband's behavior grew more erratic, his once constant presence now replaced with long hours spent in the mines, digging deeper into the earth as if trying to reach something that was buried far below. "What are you looking for?" she would ask him. But each time she tried to get closer, to understand what he was doing, he would push her away. "You wouldn't understand," he would mutter, eyes darkened by an obsession she couldn't fathom. One evening, after a lavish banquet that did little to lift their spirits, she followed him into the heart of their home, where he had begun to build a strange shrine to the land's ancestors. Strange symbols adorned the walls, etched into the very stone beneath their feet. As she stepped closer, she saw the same necklace she had worn on their wedding night, now placed on a pedestal with offerings of gold and precious gems surrounding it. "Why?" she whispered, the words barely escaping her throat. "Why would you do this?" Her husband turned to face her, his eyes wild. "The gold calls to them," he said, his voice trembling. "I thought I could control it, but now they are coming." Her heart pounded as she realized the truth. It wasn't just a curse, he had willingly awakened the gods of the land, and now they would take everything from them. In the following days, strange events began to unfold. The earth trembled, the skies darkened, and the ancestral spirits of her people began to appear. They were no longer just whispers in the night, they were tangible, standing before her, their faces twisted in anger. "You have betrayed us," they would say, their voices a chorus of fury. "You woke us from our slumber, and now you will pay the price." The gods were angry, and her family's fortune was nothing more than an offering to appease their wrath. She could feel the weight of their judgment, the pressure of a curse that stretched far beyond her understanding. But her husband, who had once been her protector, seemed to have become one of them, lost in the hunger for more gold, more power, more wealth. He had crossed the line, and now there was no turning back. One night, as the moon hung high in the sky, she made a decision. She would end it, whatever it took. She could no longer be a pawn in this twisted game of wealth and curses. "I will not let them take everything," she swore, standing in the shadows of their crumbling mansion, looking out toward the distant hills that held the cursed gold. But the question still lingered in her mind. Could she truly escape the gods' wrath? Could anyone? The night would come when she would discover just how far she would go to break the curse, and whether her husband's sins would be her undoing. The night was eerily still, the only sound the distant howl of wind sweeping through the desolate halls of the palace. Her mind raced, thoughts of escape clouding her every move. She had made up her mind. The ancient gold had become a deadly shackle, and she would no longer wear it. But breaking the curse would require more than just leaving the mansion. It would require confronting the gods themselves. The weight of her ancestors' judgment pressed upon her shoulders, and the fear of what she might find kept her from taking the first step. Yet there was no turning back. "If I have to face them, then so be it," she whispered to herself. The moonlight illuminated her path as she slipped into the night, away from the once grand palace that now felt more like a tomb. As she walked through the abandoned streets, a strange calm washed over her. The voices of her ancestors had grown silent, but she could still feel their presence, their watchful eyes on her every move. They are waiting, she thought. But for what? For her to fail, or for her to succeed in ridding herself of the curse that had been placed upon her? She made her way to the heart of the kingdom, where the land's ancient gold mines lay hidden beneath the surface. The closer she got, the heavier the air seemed to become, thick with the energy of the earth itself. She could hear the rhythmic tapping of a pickaxe in the distance, the sound of her husband still searching. still trying to control what could not be controlled. He was so deep in his obsession, so blinded by his desire for more, that he didn't see what was coming. She did. As she approached the mines, an inexplicable force seemed to pull her forward. Her feet moved of their own accord, as though the earth itself was guiding her to her destiny. "You must make the sacrifice," she heard in her mind, the whisper of the ancestors, faint but clear. "It is the only way." She paused at the entrance of the mine, looking into the abyss. The darkness seemed to swallow her whole, but she stepped forward anyway, heart pounding in her chest. She was no longer the woman who had walked into this kingdom with hopes of a fairy tale life. She was the woman who would undo the chains of destiny, no matter the cost. Suddenly, a figure appeared before her shadow, tall and regal. "You seek to break the curse," the figure said, its voice a low, echoing growl. "But you do not know what you ask." It was her husband. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, an unnatural light that chilled her to the bone. "You cannot escape the gods," he continued, his voice distorted, as if speaking from a realm far beyond the living. "This land was built on sacrifice, and it will be paid for with blood." Her heart sank. This wasn't her husband anymore. This was something darker, something twisted by greed and the curse of the land. "You knew what you were doing," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "You knew the price, and you still chose to take it." The shadow that had once been her husband smiled coldly. "We all choose, my dear. The land gave me wealth, and it demanded more. It has always demanded more. Now you must choose. Will you sacrifice yourself to free us from its grip, or will you let it consume us all?" Her world felt like it was collapsing in on itself. She had always believed in love, in the power of partnership. But now, she saw the truth for what it was. Her husband was no longer the man she had married. He had become one with the greed and power of the land, and he was lost to her. Her mind raced, her thoughts swirling. "I have no choice," she thought, standing tall against the weight of the curse. "I will not be consumed." But even as she made the decision to confront the gods, something shifted in the air. A deep, rumbling tremor shook the ground beneath her feet, and the ancient gold buried deep within the mines began to glow. The earth itself seemed to open up, revealing a hidden temple that had long been forgotten by time. As she stepped forward, she could feel the presence of the gods watching her, their eyes like fiery embers. "You are ready to make the sacrifice," they whispered in unison. "But know that there is no turning back." Her hand trembled as she reached for the golden necklace she had once worn so proudly. It was now more than just a symbol of wealth. It was a symbol of her ancestors' wrath, of the curse that had bound her to this land. "I will free us," she whispered, as she pulled the necklace from her neck. As she held the gold in her hands, the earth trembled once more, and a blinding light erupted from the temple. The gods were angry. The gods were watching. And in that moment, she realized just how much her fate and her husband's tied to the land. But could she truly free them? The light from the temple was blinding, its intensity so powerful that she could feel her skin burning. Yet, she did not flinch. She held the necklace high, as though offering it to the gods themselves, willing to give up everything to break the curse. The ground beneath her shook violently, and a voice, ancient and filled with sorrow, echoed through the temple. "You dare defy us? You who are bound by the blood of this land?" The gold in her hand began to pulse with a life of its own, as if responding to the gods' challenge. She could feel its power, a force stronger than anything she had ever known. And yet, she did not falter. "I will break the curse," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear that gripped her heart. Suddenly, the earth split open, and the silhouette of her husband appeared before her, his body glowing with an unnatural light. "You cannot escape me," he said, his voice now a hollow echo of what it once was. "You belong to this land, just as I do," but she knew the truth now. He was no longer the man she had married. He had become one with the curse, and it had consumed him. "I don't belong to this land," she whispered, as the gods watched silently. "I belong to myself." With a final defiant movement, she threw the gold necklace into the heart of the temple. A deafening roar erupted from the earth, shaking the very foundations of the kingdom. "No more," she said, her voice firm. "No more will the curse control us." The ground trembled one last time before everything fell silent. The air was still. The light from the temple faded, and her husband's figure disappeared into the darkness. But as she stood there, the weight of the curse lifted. She knew that the gods had taken their price. She had broken the chains that bound her to this land, but at what cost? The kingdom was free. But was she truly free from the past? As the light from the temple faded, and the ground beneath her feet settled into stillness, she stood alone in the eerie quiet of the ancient mine. The weight of the curse had been lifted, but the cost of her defiance was far greater than she had ever imagined. Her heart still raced, and the remnants of the gods' wrath lingered in the air like a heavy fog, thick with unspoken words. "Did I do the right thing?" she whispered to herself, as the once possessive grip of the wealth and land began to fade. The ancestral gold that had once been so tightly linked to her bloodline lay silent now, a mere relic of the past. The whispers that had haunted her every step, the warnings, the curses, the promises ceased. Yet there was an undeniable emptiness that filled the space where once there had been riches and power. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she looked at the sky, the clouds clearing slowly, allowing the first rays of dawn to pierce through. The world seemed quieter now, almost like the calm before the storm. "What now?" she asked the heavens, her voice echoing against the walls of the mine. Just as she began to turn away from the temple's remains, a figure appeared before her. She froze. It was her husband, no longer a shadow, no longer consumed by greed, but an image of the man she had once loved. His face was now filled with sorrow, his eyes heavy with the burden of what had been lost. "I failed you," he whispered, his voice filled with regret. "I never wanted this for you, or for us." Her heart tightened as she looked at him, recognizing the man she had once married. Yet, despite the tenderness in his voice, she knew deep down that there was no going back. "You did this to us," she said softly, but with finality. "The gods have claimed what was theirs, and now we must live with the consequences." His gaze lowered, and he seemed to age before her eyes, his once youthful energy drained by the weight of their shared destiny. "I will leave," he said, his voice barely audible. "I will go far from here, to face the wrath that should have been mine alone." With those words he turned away, walking into the shadows that had once consumed him. She watched him disappear, knowing that their love had not been enough to survive the curse that bound them. In the silence that followed, she felt the sting of betrayal of a love lost, not just to greed, but to the relentless forces of fate. But there was no time to mourn. The kingdom that had once thrived on wealth and power was now at the mercy of the gods, and her actions had set things in motion that could not be undone. "The kingdom will rebuild," she thought, though the words sounded hollow. "But will I ever rebuild?" As she walked back towards the kingdom, the sun rising higher in the sky, she realized something crucial. She had broken the curse, but not without cost. Her family's fortune had been destroyed, and her marriage had crumbled into dust. "What is left for me now?" she wondered, as the landscape before her stretched out like an empty canvas. Months passed, and the kingdom began to heal, though it was a slow, painful process. The wealth that had once ruled the land was gone, but so was the curse that had bound it. The people, who had once lived in the shadow of gold, began to rebuild with what they had left: hope, resilience, and the strength of their spirits. But for her, the path was different. She had left the ruins of the palace behind, choosing to live among the people, far from the taint of gold and power. The woman who had once been a queen was now a humble wanderer, seeking redemption not in wealth, but in peace. Perhaps I was never meant for this life, she thought as she worked alongside the villagers, learning the ways of the earth, the rhythms of life without the luxury that had once defined her existence. But the ghosts of the past would not easily let her go. One evening, as she sat by a fire, an old woman approached her, a woman whose eyes gleamed with knowledge far beyond the mortal world. "You are the one," the woman said, her voice calm but full of weight. "The gods have seen your heart, and they have watched your choices. The curse was broken, but now a new destiny awaits you." The woman placed a hand on her shoulder, her grip firm and knowing. "The land has been freed, but it requires a guardian, someone to watch over its future, to ensure that its wealth will never again consume those who seek it. You have been chosen, not by the gods, but by your own actions." Her heart raced as she realized the truth. "You are telling me that I have to return?" The old woman nodded. "Not return to the throne, but to protect what has been saved. The gods will not take kindly to those who forget the lessons of the past. They will watch you just as you watch them. But now, you will have the chance to rebuild for yourself and for the land that once bore your family's curse." With that, the old woman vanished into the night, leaving the woman alone with the weight of her new reality. The journey had taken everything from her, but in the end, it had given her something far greater: a chance at redemption, a chance to heal the scars left by her family's greed. As the fire burned low and the stars filled the night sky, she stood up, a new sense of purpose filling her. "I will rebuild," she whispered, the words not a promise but a declaration. "Not for wealth, not for power, but for peace." And with that, the story of the billionaire's wife came to an end. But the story of the land, of the people, and of the woman who had broken the curse, that was just the beginning. But the ghosts of the past would not easily let her go. One evening, as she sat by a fire, an old woman approached her, a woman whose eyes gleamed with knowledge far beyond the mortal world. "You are the one," the woman said, her voice calm but full of weight. "The gods have seen your heart, and they have watched your choices. The curse was broken, but now a new destiny awaits you." The woman placed a hand on her shoulder, her grip firm and knowing. "The land has been freed, but it requires a guardian, the honest someone to watch over its future, to ensure that its wealth will never again consume those who seek it. You have been chosen, not by the gods, but by your own actions." Her heart raced as she realized the truth. "You are telling me that I have to return?" The old woman nodded. "Not return to the throne, but to protect what has been saved. The gods will not take kindly to those who forget the lessons of the past. They will watch you, just as you watch them. But now, you will have the chance to rebuild for yourself, and for the land that once bore your family's curse." With that, the old woman vanished into the night, leaving the woman alone with the weight of her new reality. The journey had taken everything from her, but in the end it had given her something far greater: a chance at redemption, a chance to heal the scars left by her family's greed. As the fire burned low and the stars filled the night sky, she stood up, a new sense of purpose filling her. "I will rebuild," she whispered, The words not a promise, but a declaration. Not for wealth, not for power, but for peace. And with that, the story of the billionaire's wife came to an end. But the story of the land, of the people, and of the woman who had broken the curse, that was just the beginning.